Center for the Study of Hate and Extremism at Cal State University. Brian, your job is one that is absolutely incredible, and that it is your job to study hate, what motivates people to carry out this very act that we saw this morning in Orlando.
Well, one of the things that we've seen, and this is important, ISIS is not trying to cultivate religious scholars of goodwill. They have a fellow al-Baghdadi whose edicts are binding only on those who follow him. And he is a violent, hateful man who is an affront to all civilized society, whether Muslim, Christian, or other. The thing is, they target unstable, they target criminal, they target disenfranchised, and they have a very sophisticated internet network. I testified before Congress about this and said the combination of this desire to cultivate lone wolves, many of whom are not even particularly religious or even converts to violence, is something that is a cornerstone of what their American strategy is. They cannot easily get folks into the United States like they can in places like Europe, like Kosovo, or Belgium, or France, where they can go into theater and back home. So what they try to do is cultivate unstable, angry, violent people with their own bastardization of one of the great Abrahamic faiths, and they're being successful at it. We are in the middle of this. If they could launch a coordinated attack, they would. One of the things that I think is curious, they called this assailant a warrior. That's something they did not do with the attackers who hit our community, who they called supporters. But nevertheless, they did this after facts came out about his claiming bayat or allegiance to Mr. al-Baghdadi, the head of ISIS. So what I think is, as of now, and this is subject to change, you always, as a former NYPD officer, you let the investigation take you, not the other way around where it goes. But my feeling from the beginning was this was kind of a lone wolf, Salafist jihadist supporter rather than someone who's been orchestrated. But let's see what kind of connections he might have had. The more this gets unraveled, the more we see he had a connection to a suicide bomber who hit Syria. Let's see how deep that connection was and reserve complete conclusions. But this looks like the exact strategy which I warned Congress about on October 28th. And I will tell you one thing, there's a lot of commentary about how Washington doesn't work and Congress doesn't work. I'm going to tell you something. That Homeland Security Committee is the best that America has to offer. Both sides of the fence, Republican and Democrat, and they take this threat very seriously. Our center regards the Salafist jihadist threat as the most prominent, but not the only one facing the United States, and especially lone wolves. And that lone wolf goes also across other ideologies, including racists and neo-Nazis. But the most prominent threat facing the United States continues to be these kind of lone wolves who have access to weaponry. How the heck did this guy get a license for both firearms and security work when he was a subject of investigation? We need an investigation about that, and we need to reform things so that people who may be on a terror watch list cannot buy semi-automatic weapons.
And we don't know if he was actually on the terror watch list, but to your point, if he worked at a security agency and one that is potentially responsible for, a global type security situation, you do wonder whether or not he was actually arrested, indicted, that he was questioned multiple times. Is that something that ends up in your personnel record and maybe disqualifies you from being able to have that position and that at least work at that agency? But Brian, what I'm intrigued also by, you made the point that ISIS, whether or not he had direct contact, he clearly from the 911 call wanted to present himself as someone who had some type of contact or was inspired by. That was his aim at putting out that 911 call. We know that. And it works to the benefit of ISIS, which is why their media affiliate put out the statement. But look at this shot of him with the kufi on. We don't know the timeline there, but he's presenting himself in potentially, if we're going by the kufi alone, in a traditional Muslim fashion. The other photographs of him in the T-shirt, more casually dressed, that's not his presentation of himself. And you made the point that his ex-wife did. He was not, at least at some point, viewed by people who knew him intimately as a religious man. That doesn't matter to ISIS. They're not looking for someone. And this was brought up after 9/11 with some of the attackers who brought down the Trade Center. There were many things in their past that were not consistent with the ideology that they claim to be motivated by.
Look, Anwar al-Awlaki was seeing prostitutes. These people are not religious scholars. What they are doing is they're trying to take a bastardization of one of the great Abrahamic faiths and twist it. And let me tell you something, as someone who reads the literature from ISIS, Dabiq magazine, or looks at their videos of them torturing LGBT people in the Middle East, dozens and dozens by judicial edict, I can tell you, I have been hearing consistently this morning from my dear friends in the Muslim American community how disgusted they are and how they stand shoulder to shoulder. But the bottom line is ISIS or Daesh doesn't care. They'll take anyone, particularly people who are flawed, because they're the ones who are most likely to be able to come under their spell, whether they're converts, whether they're disenchanted, whether they're mentally unstable. And what they say in their magazine is, go ahead, hit people in your community, use soft targets, and you will go to paradise. Go ahead. It doesn't matter. And if you have to violate some religious laws, go ahead and do that too, because you're doing the greatest good. They put it in their magazine. They honored the assailants that so attacked and caused pain in our community. And we're going to see more of this. This is the most prominent terrorist threat facing the United States today. Right. These lone wolves, and we don't know for sure whether he's a lone wolf, but that's where we're speculating now, who are inspired but not orchestrated, but there's so much material on the internet as to what to do and who to hit. What they do is they label, here are some types of weapons, here are the legitimate targets of aggression who are enemies to Islam. And let me just say one other thing. In reading, for instance, Dabiq magazine, the last one, 14 that came out, it said, go attack fellow Muslims because they're not real Muslims. Right. This is something we see all the time. They not just attack out groups like the LGBT community, they also attack co-religionists, and they list prominent American Muslims as people who should be held out for disdain and aggression.
All right, Brian, if you can stand by, let me bring in now former NYPD Detective Thomas Ruskin. Thank you so much, Thomas, for